The man who gave up fame, fortune, and family, Tolstoy's final truth. He had everything. The world called him a genius, a literary titan, a spiritual prophet, a voice of the people. But one day, he walked away. From his wealth, from his family, from the very life he built with his own words. Why? What makes a man turn his back on the applause of millions? What truth is so powerful that it makes you abandon your name, your legacy, your home? Tolstoy didn't just change his beliefs. He annihilated them, burned down his old self like a heretic escaping his own temple. And in that fire, he saw something most men never dare to face. The naked truth of existence. This video won't comfort you. It will unsettle you. Because what Tolstoy discovered at the end of his life is something we spend our whole lives trying to avoid. If you still have the courage to hear it, like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell. This journey will strip you bare. And maybe, just maybe, set you free. Part 1. The beautiful lie that made him famous. Before Tolstoy walked away from the world, he built one with his pen. It was dazzling, rich, immortal. Through War and Peace and Anna Karenina, he painted the Russian soul in epic strokes. Love, honor, betrayal, faith. He became more than a writer. He was a mirror. And that mirror made people believe they understood life. But that was the illusion. He knew it. Even as the applause grew louder, he felt the crack underneath the stage. He wasn't writing truth. He was writing beauty, crafted, perfected, sold. His stories seduced the world, but they left his own soul starving. Because beauty, he realized, is not the same as meaning. Imagine reaching the top of the mountain, only to see it was the wrong one. The celebrations felt hollow. The admiration turned into noise. His fame was built on romanticism, but real life wasn't romantic. He watched the peasants outside his estate starve while his characters dined on metaphor. He began to feel like a liar. The deeper he looked, the more it burned. He once believed art could save us. Now he saw it as a distraction, a decoration on the coffin of modern life. Tolstoy's success was his prison. He was praised for describing love, yet didn't know what it truly meant. He was famous for portraying life, but death haunted him like an unsolved riddle. What if all of it, his novels, his status, even his legacy, was a sophisticated escape from truth? This question grew louder. He started reading religious texts obsessively. He began rejecting luxury. He stopped writing fiction. Something inside him was dying, or finally being born. He called it his spiritual awakening. But it was more like a violent unraveling. Everything he had built no longer made sense. He looked at his books and saw ghosts. Not masterpieces. Ghosts of the man he used to be, the man who wanted to be loved by the world. And that's when the guilt arrived. He saw the contradiction of his life. Preaching simplicity while living in abundance. Speaking of brotherhood while owning land that others toiled. He couldn't unsee the hypocrisy. It rotted him from the inside. So he did what few would ever dare. He tried to burn it all down. Not in flames, but in silence. He stopped publishing. Gave away copyrights. Tried to renounce his wealth. Even considered leaving his wife. But walking away from the world when you're inside its center isn't easy. His family didn't understand. Society mocked him. And yet, he kept moving toward the void. Because only in the void, he believed, could he find what was real. That moment, the decision to renounce what made him famous, is where his real story begins. It's not a story of a man who succeeded. It's the story of a man who saw through success. And chose truth, even when it cost him everything. Have you ever questioned if your dreams are actually cages? Comment below. This is just the beginning. Part 2. The collapse of a man the world worshipped. Tolstoy had become a god in the eyes of his people. A prophet draped in aristocratic robes. But what happens when a god decides he is fake? Not just mistaken, but fraudulent. That's the crisis Tolstoy stepped into. He dismantled himself piece by piece, in full view of the world. and the world watched in stunned silence. His inner collapse didn't look like madness. It looked like stillness. Long walks in silence. Refusals to attend public events. A sudden disgust toward his own possessions. He began dressing like a peasant, living like a monk, questioning every comfort he once considered normal. But this wasn't performance. It was purification. He had everything a man could want, yet none of it touched his soul. Not love. Not family. Not praise. Not wealth. All of it tasted like ash. He realized he had never truly lived, only written about life while standing behind a glass wall. Tolstoy believed his previous life was built on a collective lie. A lie that art, when separated from truth, becomes narcotic. That luxury, when disconnected from labor, becomes theft. And that morality, when not lived with blood and sweat, is just theater. He was no longer willing to act. But the collapse wasn't just philosophical, it was physical. His health declined. His body weakened. He stopped eating meat, refused doctors, and sought simplicity as if it were salvation. To many, he looked like a man going mad. To him, it was finally sanity. His estate became a battlefield. He tried to give away his copyrights to the people. His wife fought him bitterly. She couldn't understand why the man who once adored her now sought exile. She read his diaries and wept, finding words that tore through the illusion of their marriage. He wasn't just walking away from wealth. He was walking away from her. There's a kind of betrayal that feels holy. That's what Tolstoy was doing. Betraying the version of himself the world loved. The great man, everyone quoted. The national treasure. He wanted none of it. He wanted God. Not the God of priests or dogmas, but the God found in suffering, labor, silence, and truth. He began writing again, but not novels. Essays. Manifestos. Confessions. Each one dripping with urgency and despair. He criticized the church. Attacked private property. Preached radical nonviolence. He became a spiritual revolutionary. And the Russian authorities hated him for it. They threatened to excommunicate him. He said, "Do what you must. I already left the church in my heart." His moral clarity became unbearable for those in power. Not because he incited rebellion, but because he exposed emptiness. Not with fire, but with withdrawal. Tolstoy's collapse wasn't just personal. It was political, cultural, existential. He made the powerful look ridiculous, and the poor feel seen. He turned the world upside down simply by refusing to play its game. And yet, he suffered. This was not a peaceful transformation. It was bloody, humiliating, tragic. He cried. He doubted. He begged for meaning like a starving man claws for bread. But he never turned back. The man who once held the world in his hands now held nothing. And for the first time, he felt free. Have you ever collapsed in silence, just to hear who you really are underneath? Comment below. We're not done yet. Part 3. The truth he found in the dirt. Tolstoy didn't find truth in books. Not in philosophy. Not even in scripture. He found it in the dirt. In sweat. In calloused hands. In the silence between breaths after working the land. He believed the peasants, those the world ignored, had something he had lost. Not knowledge, but grounding. Not sophistication, but truth. They lived close to death. Close to pain. Close to what he now saw as the only thing that mattered. Reality without decoration. He began to farm with them. Not symbolically, but seriously. Digging. Sowing. Eating with calloused fingers. Sleeping on rough wood. And in those hours of labor, he glimpsed something sacred. A kind of humility that no theory could give him. This wasn't a man playing poor. This was a man atoning. Every swing of the sickle was a confession. Every shared loaf of bread, an absolution. He believed physical work was not just noble. It was cleansing. In the dirt, he no longer had to be Tolstoy. He could be no one. And in being no one, he found peace. The kind of peace that doesn't glitter, doesn't shout, doesn't perform. Just is. But this peace was fragile. Because society kept trying to drag him back. Publishers begged for more fiction. Aristocrats asked for advice. Pilgrims traveled miles just to see his face. And always, his name, Tolstoy, hung around his neck like a golden chain he couldn't cut. He tried. Oh, he tried. But fame, once ignited, is nearly impossible to extinguish. It follows you like a shadow, especially when you don't want it. Still, he persisted in his rebellion. He refused to live in comfort. He denounced private property. He gave away his royalties. He taught that happiness lay not in possessing, but in surrendering. That to be truly alive, you must live as if death could come at any second, and find you clean. His writings from this period shocked his former admirers. They called him mad. A traitor to his class. A fool. But he didn't care. He had found a new authority. Not the church, not the state, not the academy. But conscience. He described his awakening as a moment of light piercing the darkness. Not euphoric. But clear. Sharp. Like cold water on the face of a man lost in dreams. And in that cold light, everything false dissolved. He saw how society was built on illusions. Money. Hierarchy. Reputation. All of it, smoke. And once you breathe real air, you can't go back to breathing smoke. Tolstoy wanted others to see it too. So he wrote his most controversial works. The Kingdom of God is within you. A confession. What I believe. They weren't literary. They were explosive. Gandhi would later say that Tolstoy's writings were what first taught him nonviolence. Martin Luther King Jr. was inspired by them, too. But at the time, these books made Tolstoy a heretic in the eyes of his own country. He didn't care. He had touched something eternal. Not in heaven, but in the sweat of labor. The silence of solitude. And the unflinching gaze into his own shadow. Have you ever touched truth so raw it burned everything else away? Comment below. Because we're about to go deeper. Part 4. Exile, Silence, and the Station Where He Died. Tolstoy's life didn't end in comfort. It ended in exile. Not the kind imposed by governments, but the kind chosen by the soul. The deeper he went into truth, the further he drifted from the world. Even from his own family. He had tried to reconcile the two. To live between silence and society, poverty and privilege, faith and family. But the tension tore him in half. His wife, Sophia, couldn't follow. His children watched with confusion. His disciples tried to interpret his choices, but even they fell short. Because this was no longer about philosophy. It was about death. And how to meet it without lies. He had long believed that dying well required living rightly. That you couldn't fake your way into peace. So, in his final days, he made a decision. He would leave. Not to write. Not to preach. But to vanish. In the middle of the night, at age 82, Leo Tolstoy slipped away from his estate. Wrapped in a peasant coat, carrying a small satchel. He disappeared like a ghost from the house that once bore his name. No farewell letter. No announcement. Just departure. One final act of refusal. The news broke across Russia like thunder. The most famous man in the empire had vanished. Was he kidnapped? Mad? Dead? No. He was just walking. Toward simplicity. Toward silence. Toward death. But his body couldn't follow where his soul wanted to go. He fell ill days later, at a small rural train station called Astapovo. A forgotten place, quiet, ordinary, dirt-covered. And there, in a station master's home, Leo Tolstoy lay down to die. Imagine that. A man who once dined with emperors. Now lying on a wooden bench, wrapped in rags. Surrounded not by scholars or statesmen, but by curious villagers and stunned officials who had tracked him down. They begged him to return. To make peace with his family. To see a doctor. To let them save him. But it was too late. His body was failing. And maybe he didn't want saving. Maybe this raw, stripped, ordinary death was exactly what he had been walking toward all along. There were no grand speeches, no final chapters, only coughing, silence, and flickering breath. Outside, journalists camped. Inside, the great Tolstoy dissolved. And then, he was gone. A death that looked like failure to the world. But to him, it may have been the first real truth he ever lived fully. He had walked away from everything, and died in the arms of nothing. No title, no estate, no mask. Just breath. Then silence. That silence said more than any of his books. Have you ever wondered how you'd want to die? And what it would take to be ready? Comment below. The most important part is next. Part 5. What Tolstoy's death was trying to teach us. Tolstoy's death wasn't an ending. It was a message. Etched not in words, but in the shape of his final choice. To die alone, unknown, unseen. He had once written 1,000 pages to describe life. But in his last days, he spoke almost nothing. Because what he had come to realize can't be said. It can only be lived. The truth he discovered wasn't glamorous. It didn't reward him with peace or recognition. It stripped him down to bone and breath. It exiled him from his own name. But it gave him one gift the world could never offer. Clarity. He wanted us to see what he saw. That the pursuit of comfort leads to numbness. That success without truth is failure wearing a crown. That real freedom isn't given to you. It's reclaimed through suffering. He had spent decades in mansions, speaking to kings. But he learned more in a single field with peasants than in a lifetime of salons. He learned that pain is not the enemy. That death is not the villain. That the real lie is believing we have time to waste on what doesn't matter. And that's what he wanted you to feel. Not to admire him. Not to quote him. But to question everything. Even your deepest joys. Even your holiest beliefs. Even your brightest ambitions. Because if your peace depends on money, status, or applause, you are building on sand. Tolstoy's teachings were never about self-help. They were about self-confrontation. He wasn't trying to comfort your mind. He was trying to provoke your soul. He asked, "What would you do if you knew you were going to die next week? Would you keep pretending? Would you keep performing? Or would you finally drop the mask?" His answer was simple. Walk away. Not from people, but from illusion. He believed society trains us to be useful, not honest. Entertaining, not true. And the moment we stop performing, we become dangerous. Because truth, once lived, exposes every lie others still hide behind. That's why his life ended in exile. Not because he failed, but because he succeeded in becoming what few ever dared to be. A man unknown by the world. So what now? You watched a man give everything up to touch what is real. The question isn't, was he right? The question is, what are you still clinging to that's keeping you from freedom? Comment below. We still have one last thing to say. Part 6, the final truth. You must choose what to lose. Every man loses something. His youth. His illusions. His time. The question is never if you will lose. It's what you're willing to lose on purpose. Tolstoy chose to lose it all. Not in a fit of madness, but with terrifying clarity. He understood what most never will. You cannot carry the truth and your ego in the same hands. One of them must be dropped. The world called him insane, unstable, a traitor to reason. But what they couldn't admit, what terrified them, was that his collapse revealed their delusion. They were still chasing applause, still clinging to comfort, still mistaking recognition for worth. While he, old and frail, walked barefoot into the abyss and smiled. Because freedom isn't about escaping pain. It's about choosing a pain that's real. A life stripped of performance. A death without regret. He showed us that giving up doesn't mean surrender. It means sacrifice. A sacred cutting away. The ego screams, "You're dying!" But the soul whispers, "Now we begin." He gave up fame because it distorted his voice. He gave up wealth because it numbed his conscience. He gave up family, not out of cruelty, but because sometimes even love becomes a prison when it refuses to grow. He walked away to remember what he was before the world gave him a name. And in doing so, he returned to something ancient, a truth deeper than thought, a silence more honest than speech, a God who asks not for worship, but for presence. Tolstoy's final truth wasn't written in a book. It was carved into the path he walked barefoot. It was etched in the cold floor of a station where he died. It was hidden in the empty hands he carried to his grave. He lost the world and gained himself. And now the choice is yours. Keep climbing the ladder they gave you, or drop it. Keep perfecting the image they love, or erase it. Keep chasing what will never be enough, or walk away and meet the terrifying beauty of being nothing, so you can finally become something real. This is your crossroads. You don't need to become Tolstoy. You just need to stop pretending you're already alive. So, what are you willing to lose? To touch the truth? Comment below. And if you're still breathing, you still have time to choose. Part 7. There is a silence waiting inside you. You hear it in the pause between your thoughts, in the ache beneath your ambitions, in the question that keeps returning when the lights go out. What if none of this is real? Tolstoy followed that silence. He let it break him. He let it carry him beyond names, beyond duty, beyond even love. He died not as a writer, or a prophet, or a husband. He died as a man, barefoot, breathless, and free. And maybe that's all we're here to become. Not impressive, not successful, but real. You don't need to walk into exile. You don't need to abandon everything. But you do need to ask, what part of you was built to be admired? And what part of you was born to be true? If you felt something in this video, something raw, something uncomfortable, something sacred, then this isn't the end. It's the beginning. So don't just close this window and scroll on. Sit with it. Write. Breathe. And if you're ready to keep going deeper, like this video, subscribe, turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next, and share this with someone who's been walking towards silence too. Someone who's ready to lose everything, just to finally live. We'll be here, waiting in the quiet.